Hello, welcome to Quilt in Color. For day 26 of the 15 Minutes to Quilt Challenge, we're going to be working on the Amalfi Coast quilt. This quilt is a simple courthouse steps quilt that's made with all sorts of beautiful fabrics that make me think about waters on the Italy coastline. And so I'm calling it the Amalfi Coast quilt. As you can see, this quilt is almost finished. It just needs an inner border and an outer border. I hope you get a chance to sew with me today. Let's get started. Let me show you here. So here's the quilt top. And what I did was I went to the center of the blocks here. This is the center this way on this quilt. And so what I did was I took the sashing strip, measured it across the center to make sure it was exactly the same size. It's a little bit difficult for you to show this to you in this camera. I had to put the quilt on the floor to be able to measure it exactly right. I made two inner binding strips, one for each side of the quilt. So one of them is for the top and one of them is for the bottom. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to find the middle of this strip. So here we have the middle of this strip, and I'm going to pin it to the middle of the top of this quilt. And I know the middle of this one is in this middle block because there's 5 blocks here. So I know the middle of this block is the middle of my strip, and it's because it's fussy cut, it's really easy to see where the middle is here. It's right here. So I'm going to pin right sides together right here, the middles of both the blocks, of both the pieces. So the middle of the inner border goes to the middle of the quilt top. And then I do the same with the end, right sides together. Here. And I'm going to do the same on the other side of this. Making sure this is a nice angle. I'm going to make sure it's square, completely square. Okay, now I'm going to compare the top. I'm going to just stretch these out a little bit to make sure that they're straight, and then find the middle of this, both of these, and pin there. This border fabric, must not have trimmed it straight on the grain because it is a little bit stretchy, but I think it's fine. It's going to be fine. And then I'm going to do the same to the other side. Is to find the middle, make sure I stretch them to make sure that everything is, I'm not stretching them, I guess. What I'm doing is I'm pulling them to see if they are straight, which they should be since they're the same size, and then finding the middle approximate and just pinning there. And then I can do the same for the next quarter. So since I have this pin and this pin, I'll try to put a pin in the middle here. So this way, if there is any stretching while I'm sewing, I'll still have good marks to make sure that I'm only working on one section at a time. You can see, even though it looks a little bit loose, when I pull it, it looks fine. Actually, I'm going to just make sure that I have the middle. There we go. It's a little bit easier now. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this here. Usually I don't usually that's enough pins for me. But because my fabric is a little bit stretchy, I want to make sure that I have as much security as I can in this. And while I'm here, I'll go ahead and do the other side so I can just sew them both. Make sure when you're doing this, you are getting the other side and not getting you're still doing the same part of the quilt. So this is the bottom of the quilt or the top of the quilt, and the other one is the other way. So you're not accidentally doing the side, because for this quilt, it's a 5x4 layout, so the sizes will be completely different. You don't want to accidentally put the wrong size, and that'll warp your quilt completely. Although usually you can tell when there's a mistake, especially when there's a big difference. Okay, so again, there's 5 blocks here. So this is the center right here. And since I fussy cut this, I know that this is the exact center. I'm going to pin them right sides together in the center. Oops, stuck my pin. Then I pin the ends. And I can pin this center if I wanted to, but I'm just going to go ahead and do the ends. This would also be something good to do while you're on the floor measuring the quilt, to go ahead and pin the borders. That way the quilt is flat on the floor when you're doing this. But it's at the end of the challenge and my floors are not clean right now, so I'm not going to show them to you. And my camera equipment is not set up for different rooms in the house. Camera angle's a little bit awkward because I want to show you close-ups, but then that means that you can't see the distance view. So for this sashing, I decided that since I was adding strips into my quilt, like here you can see that I added a different color here just for fun in here, that I wanted to add some extra fun pieces into the border as well. And that's why the border fabric doesn't all look the same. Here's the block that has the different parts. Okay, so now I have both of these pinned down, so I'm just going to go ahead and sew them. Okay, now I'm just going to sew the inner border to the quilt top. It's important to keep the quilt top on the table to avoid drag. And even though generally in quilting you don't need to backstitch or do anything to fix the seams, but for the border I like to add some extra security and go ahead and fix it. And I have this fixed feature on my machine that stitches over a couple times to secure the thread. It would also be a good time to cut off these extra threads, but because I want to finish this in 15 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and just leave them here and cut them afterwards. I just pull out the pins before the needle gets to it to make sure that I don't break the sewing machine needle. And I don't mess up the timing or any problems with the machine. And this is a quick and easy long seam, so as long as you make sure that both the sides are lining up correctly, you can sew pretty quickly. But it's always good to stop now and then for quality inspection. And as always, just work on one small area at a time. And for this one, since there are seams on the back, you'll want to make sure you check to make sure the seams are going in the right direction. Sometimes, usually I pin those seam allowances in the right direction so that I'll remember to keep track of them. I'll do the other side. Again, make sure you keep it on the table. Usually when you have a big quilt like this, the ends are far enough apart that you can go ahead and just turn the quilt around, otherwise you'll have to start and stop. You do want to make sure that you're not pulling anything when you're sewing this down. Okay, so the next step, I'm going to press the little binding strip away from the quilt top. And that way I'll know the exact size to put the other binding strip for this side. I'll lay it back down on the floor after I press it, and then I'll measure the binding strip, measure 2 binding strips through the middle of this part of the quilt, and then that way it'll be both of these will be the same exact size. When you have 2 the exact same size binding strip border strips, these are inner borders. When you had 2 of the same size inner border strips and even the outer border strips, that makes sure that the quilt will be as square as you can get it to be, otherwise you have wavy edges. This video is one of a series of videos that I'm doing where I bring out each of the projects that I have in process and I just see how much work I can get done 15 minutes at a time. I hope that you had a chance to sew along with me today, and if you did, just let me know in the comments what you worked on and how much you got done today, and I'll give you an entry in the drawing. Thank you for watching. I appreciate all of your support, and we'll see you again tomorrow.